In this series of videos, we've been explaining how to create a Brick Breaker Lite or Brick Breaker-esque app in App Inventor. In this specific video, we're going to go over changes to the collision that we've previously done in the player bar sprite. Okay? So specifically, we're going to cover how to proceduralize the items that we've done. So if we look at our collided width, you'll notice it's a lot shorter because all we do now is determine if we've collided with the ball and then call a procedure. So we want to make a procedure from our procedure block and call it bounce off rectangle, and it's going to take a sprite. So this bounce procedure will allow us to use it for any rectangle and not just the player bar. All right, so we're going to start, right? We know that we have an edge, right? We know that we need to bounce off some edge, so we're going to start by initializing a local variable to 0 and call it bounce edge. And next we're going to define another procedure called determine the bounce edge, because we need to know whether we want to bounce off the right side, the top, the left, or the bottom of the rectangle. So we need to set our bounce edge to the procedure determine bounce edge. So this is a different type of procedure similar to what we've used that returns a result but is much more complicated than the one-line ones we've run before. All right, and we'll go over that shortly. Right, so we want to grab that procedure block and call it determine bounce edge, and it's going to take a single parameter called sprite, and we're going to send our sprite to it. Okay, so we get a parameter, right? We send an argument player bar sprite, we get a parameter called sprite. We're going to send that to determine bounce edge because we want to pass player bar sprite through our procedure all the way to determine bounce edge. All right, and so lastly, we can assume this works, or maybe it does nothing right now. Okay, just simply return 0. Right, we can simply say 0 here, and it will completely execute correctly. Of course, 0 is not a valid edge, so what we want to do is say if our bounce edge is not equal to 0, we actually want to call our bounce, which it means that when it is 0, in this case of this simpleton function, it won't bounce. So after updating these two things and putting a 0 here, our ball should no longer bounce off our player bar. It should go straight through it and the game should be over. Right? Because we've already updated when it hits the south edge that it should end the game. Now let's go over the procedure that's slightly more complicated than the one line, get the right corner, left corner, and so on and so forth that we've done before. Right? So we have this determine bounce edge, and we actually want to return a variable. So if we look at our variables, we have two options for local and a global. We actually want a local variable, but we want to return it, which means we need this little notch. Okay? So we stick that in our result, and we can name it edge reached. Okay? So we have this set up already, and we've set it to 0. So if we went through all of this code and edge reach was never changed, we never used this set block, then we'd be returning 0, just like in that basic function we just had. But instead we're going to use what is called a do to go through a bunch of blocks. And all of these blocks we've already written, right? So they've already exist in our player bar sprite, our old one, right? And so we're going to do all of those blocks that we previously wrote. right? So this whole if statement was in our collided with event. And we're simply moving it into a do block, right, that we grabbed from control that performs all the blocks in the do and then sets a result. Okay? So we have this variable edge return that we're going to return. And so instead of bouncing, right, instead of calling bounce, we're going to set our variable that we want to return. So each of these used to be a argument to the bounce call. But now we're calling bounce over to the left. So here we just want to return the edge. So our edge to return gets set to south, north, east, and west. And then finally we put our edge to return in the result of the do. So once this procedure is executed, it will return either 0 if it didn't find an edge, or one of these 4 possible edges. So we've also updated this to be generic, because remember we updated top left, top right, so on and so forth, all to be generic blocks, which means they require a sprite. Okay, so we've set up this procedure to take a sprite so that we can call each of our new procedures that also take a sprite. All right, so in every case where we called before the simple do without a sprite, okay, we called the procedure get top bar top right x, and it simply returned the player's bar x value in the top right corner. And now it takes a sprite and will return the x value in the top right corner of that sprite. So we go through and update each of these, right? So when we updated the procedures, these blocks should have been updated and there should have been blank slots right here for the sprite. And so now we just go through and fill them all with our get sprite from our procedure. And those are the steps to update our collided with to make it generic, right? Make it collided with and then bounce off a rectangle, and as long as we pass a rectangle, it will then try to bounce. This allows us to use this bounce off rectangle for all of our bricks, which is very useful rather than rewriting all of that code again.